Hey everyone, another video. In this video we're going to be doing the same thing we did for the databases and the datasets, except for with the data point table. That's the columns. So classification of these columns is pretty intense. I have over 200 family records and I have 20-30 or so DataPoint types. So I have written a script that will be available for download in the description to fill the data. However, we are going to build a procedure that will take in a dataset ID and then go out to the information schema, find the columns, and return it. And we're going to do that by using JSON. So we're going to create dynamically executable code that will format it as JSON, spit it out, and then cursor through the JSON to insert records into the actual data point. So the classification, there's a script in the description. For the actual code, stay tuned after the title. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the DataPoint realm class family type. Now the realm is kind of what is that data? Flags, decimals, text, date, etc. The class is really our purpose, so like system or common, and the family is just some things that I've created to group them, and then the type would be the actual DataPoint type. So that's what we're going to be working with, and the script that I have provided, I just inserted the realm class family and type into a table variable, and then there are a few cursors in this script. The first cursor will go through the realm and make sure that if the realm's not null, we're going to insert it into the table. The cursor does a Cartesian with the realm, so the unique class realm combination, and the family does the same thing with the unique class and family. So now we have unique class family and realm combinations, which is how I got 200 families. And then finally, we are just taking the full complete realm class family type and looking for that type ID based on the UDT. So we kind of went from 200 families down to 27 DataPoint types. And here's kind of what it looks like all spread out. So how we're going to get the information into this table is we're going to create a new procedure. And so I need to create a data type because we're going to be handling JSON. So I'm just going to be using the DataPoint type name generic JSON with the SQL data type of varchar max. And this again is a procedure only data type, a user defined data type. So we're going to name the procedure system object dataset because that's what we're going to be passing in the dataset. And then its purpose is really just to populate the DataPoint table. So DataPoint being more or less granular than an action, we are going to give it DataPoint followed by populate as the final pieces of the name. So I'm just going to get my variables set up, and I'm using these snippets. I was thinking about doing this video 15 as a snippet video, like, hey, how I use SQL Complete, but it kind of sounded like a sales pitch. So if you have any interest in the snippets, SQL Complete by DevArt, how I use them or anything like that, please drop a comment below. Until I get enough feedback, I'm just going to, make them and use them so you could see them in action and not make a video which seems like I'm trying to sell something. I'm not. It's these snippet completes, as you can see, or these snippet managers are so helpful. I'm just declaring variables, the key. I have a snippet for the key, a snippet for the text. So I was able to declare a database, DataPoint type ID unassigned, all my names, my scripts, and these two new JSON columns. So these two JSON columns, the dataset columns is going to be an array of columns from the table, and the JSON columns, or the JSON columns variable, is going to be the unique elements within the array from the previous JSON object. So right now I'm just getting my IDs. Once again, using the snippet manager, where I can just do select basic and I get my template set up. So I'm getting the database ID and the dataset name or the table name for the incoming dataset ID. Then I'm using that database ID to get the database name from the database table. And then I'm going to get the DataPoint Type ID for the unassigned type that was in the script that I had provided. And what this allows us to do is to just get all of the columns from the table. And if we don't have a match for the UDT, then we can just mark it as unassigned, and we can create some logic that will return us unassigned columns so we can make the appropriate decisions on them. So this is kind of new for the series using parameters now for SQL execute, and I'm going to send in a JSON dataset column parameter, fill it with JSON and get it out. So this is why I really like using SP execute SQL instead of just exec open close parens. And the code in the SQL script base is pretty simple. I'm going to make sure that the JSON dataset columns is empty. So just doing that select as an empty string. We have our database name token. I'm selecting the column and domain name from information schema columns, where the table name equals another token. And how I convert this to JSON is I just let it do JSON auto, for JSON auto, like for XML if you're familiar with that. And that will, without the, without array wrapper hint, it'll just return us an array of elements, which will be column name as a key, colon the value, domain name as a key, colon the UDT. So now I'm just doing my simple if is not null and empty null checks for the incoming parameters, the dataset ID, the database name, the dataset name, and then we'll do some replacements for the base script for the tokens. And while I'm writing this, I just want to say using JSON is a pretty efficient way to overload a single parameter for a procedure. So in the process parameters video, we're going to send the process ID with a list of parameters in a JSON object so we can separate them, pull that information out and work with it. However, in 2016, modifying JSON is very inefficient. You have to, it doesn't allow parameters in the path, while 2017 allows parameters in the JSON path. I haven't done a lot of experimentation with efficiency in 2017, so that's what I'll be doing this series too. We might have to undo some of this work, but that's okay. So now that I executed the SQL and got my JSON dataset columns back, I'm just making sure that it is JSON, and SQL does provide a simple function that will check to see if the format's correct, and just declaring my snippet manager cursor. And we're going to select the value from OpenJSON and the dataset column variable that we got back. Now what this will produce is a line-by-line item of single elements that each element will have column name and domain name. So inside of this cursor, we're going to open that object as JSON, and that's why I'm fetching it into the JSON columns variable. So in the procedure, because we are pulling information out and iterating through, why is that red? Oh, I just didn't spell it correctly. Because we are iterating through the parent object, we want to make sure that we are clearing out variables, because if it doesn't find something, if SQL doesn't find something to replace it with, like not an actual null but an empty data set, it will carry on the values to the next iteration in the cursor. So we want to make sure that any variables that we use in the cursor we null out. So with this secondary OpenJSON statement, I'm selecting the items, column name and domain name, which would be the key names. However, I'm using a with statement, which allows me to supply a path to where these fields actually are. So I'm saying I'm going to call this a column name. It's generic text, and its location is root.columnName. So now I'm just going to look for the DataPoint type ID that's being returned from the domain name portion of the previous OpenJSON statement. So we will be querying the DataPoint type and on the key name, because that's what the script I provided in this video does, is it fills the key names with the actual DataPoint type name. We're going to retrieve that DataPoint type ID. So what we want to do is make sure that the DataPoint type ID has something in it. So we're going to say, if the DataPoint type ID is currently null, then give me the unassigned version of it. Which means, since we are using this DataPoint type ID in the cursor, we have to make sure that it's null when it should be null. So if the DataPoint type ID is not null, we can begin our insert statement. So we're just going to do the if not exists, system main, DBO DataPoint, where the dataset ID is the incoming dataset ID, and the column name or the DataPoint type name or the DataPoint name matches. It's because that's going to be our unique index on that table, dataset, DataPoint name. And then we can just create our insert statement. Once again, all of these are pre-built snippets or snippets that I had built in offline to use to make this video go faster. So pretty simple. Enter in the parent, DataPoint type ID, 0 for the specific dataset number right now. And that is it for our column populator. So I'm just going to query system main dataset to see what tables I have and the data point to make sure that all the data is coming or being entered correctly. And we're going to test this code. So I'll just pass it a 1 for the subject table, and I'll run it again, and it looks like it's working. So that's it for this video. I'm just going to do it again to make sure that it's stuck and it's not duplicating information, and we're good. If not exists works. Remember, like this video if you'd like to recommend it to other YouTube users that share our interests, and subscribe to support me. Next video is the process parameters, and I will see you there.